welcome to Build, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ricky CAMILLERI. Just yesterday afternoon, a disturbed woman opened fire on the YouTube campus in California. In America, this story, whether it's in the workplace, in the street, at home, or in a school, has become all too common. Joining us now to discuss preventing gun violence in the most gun-violent country are Kris Brown, the co-president of the Brady Campaign to End Gun Violence, and Gisela Marin, whose daughter was murdered by a 17-year-old kid who randomly fired bullets out of a moving car in 2007. Thank you so much for being here.
2006.
Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Thank you for being here. Gisela, let's start with you. When did you start working with the Brady Campaign, and what prompted you to do so?
Well, almost immediately when my daughter was killed in 2006, actually money that was donated and collected at her wake was donated to the Million Mom March. That was my first contact with them, and right away I knew that I wanted to do something to honor my daughter's legacy and to try to make a difference, because this shouldn't happen. You have the right to be anywhere you want to be, and you shouldn't fear for your lives. You shouldn't be afraid to be like my daughter was. It was the night before she was going back to college, just with some friends outside a deli, and this crazy person just drove by and fired 6 shots out of a moving car. All it took was one bullet to take her life. And so I think we have to really advocate for safer gun laws and gun control and anything that we can do as citizens to ensure safety.
Tell me a little bit about your daughter.
My daughter was the light of my life. She was my only child. This picture was taken in 2005 at her high school graduation. She had started school at the University of New Haven. She was pursuing criminal justice and forensic science. And like I said, the night before she was due to return to campus to start her second year of college, she, randomly became the victim of the drive-by shooting. Now, where I grew up in Tarrytown, quiet Rivertown community, things like this don't happen. So I never thought about gun violence because it wasn't anything that happened so, often that would make me worry about it. But now it's like, it has affected me in such a way that, I worry every time I'm out in crowds. My daughter, she was, I can't even say enough things. She would light up a room when she walked in. She wanted to save the world, so she,
I imagine her passion had an influence on you in the wake of her passing and all of the work that you've done.
Yes, absolutely. The day after her funeral, as I tried to go on in this new normal, I said to myself, I can either stay in this bed, be depressed, do nothing, and just, never get out of bed again, because I couldn't imagine living my life without my only child, or, as my daughter would have done, I have to get up and do something about it. So I joined New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. I supported the Brady Campaign. I also joined them, Million Mom March. And I became an advocate and just tried to get the message out that something needs to be done at the legislative level and national level. And I also started a foundation in her name, which it awards annual scholarships to students at the University of New Haven, as well as the high school, Sleepy Hollow High School in Tarrytown, where she graduated from.
Kris, oftentimes when we talk about gun violence in the United States, we simply talk about mass shootings. They are the most widespread, or not widespread, but sort of the most well-known incidents of gun violence because they're the most crazy, it seems. But they're a small percentage, right, of gun violence in this country.
Yes, they are a small percentage of gun violence in this country. About 1 to 2% of all shootings in this country per year are actually mass shootings. The rest, about 98%, are not mass shootings. And those happen every day in this country to about 100 people, just like Jessica. And I want to thank Gisela for her courage in participating in all of these years and for sharing Jessica's story. I'm here because I interact with some amazing mothers, amazing parents, amazing aunts, uncles, kids every day who are impacted in communities all over this country, just as Gisela was. And what I want to say is that this is a uniquely American problem. Other countries do not have this issue. If you live in the United States, you're 22 times more likely to get shot than in any other country.
22 times more.
22 times more than in any other country in the world.
Has that gone up over the years?
It's gone up over the years. The issue of gun violence has become an epidemic. We have over 100,000 people in this country a year who are shot, and about 36,000, this is based on rolling 5-year CDC averages, about 36,000, just over 35,000, who are shot and killed every year in this country. So we had an epidemic of traffic fatalities in this country a long time ago in the 50s and 60s. We still have too many traffic fatalities, but they've come down, and they've come down significantly because of layered protections that were put in place to actually prevent them. Things like seatbelts, things like airbags, the way that roads were designed.
Which, if I remember correctly, well, I wasn't alive, so I don't think I would remember it. But from what I understand, the sort of car lobbies at that times also, sort of like the gun lobbies now, advocated against those measures, correct?
They did. They advocated against those measures, saying they're too costly and consumers won't respond well to these kinds of measures because we've polled them and they won't respond well. And at first, that was true with seatbelts. And then there was a major campaign in this country to get people to use their seatbelts. In fact, it was something that the sociologists have looked back on the Brady Bunch, the show, and realized there was a Brady Bunch effect because the kids told the parents, wait, why am I buckling up if you're not buckling up? And so there was a conscious effort to change that, and the result is that it's changed lives. It's saved lives, significant lives. We can do something exactly the same here. We have a very simple set of measures that we are asking to be enacted to ensure the background check system actually works, to close the loopholes in the system, to ensure that assault weapons are banned from further manufacture, and to put extreme risk laws in effect in every state in this country. Those are the laws that if you have an at-risk person in your home, you can have a gun temporarily removed from their possession, custody, and control. About 6 states now have those, and they work.
How does one define an at-risk person?
The court will make that determination, but the evidence of the kind of behaviors that would make the person at risk and eligible for an order, we saw repeated again and again in the information about Nicholas Cruz.
This is the shooter in Parkland, right?
Yes, and in most of these kinds of mass shootings, you see similar kinds of writings, similar kinds of behaviors, similar kinds of information that perhaps society writ large isn't seeing, but the people living with those individuals in their homes do see those.
Yeah. I wanted to, you started that with universal background checks and closing the loopholes. Now, that is an initiative or a policy that is supported by about 92% of the
97%.
97%
yes.
of Americans.
Yes, all of the policies that I took you through, the Brady 3-point plan here, expanding and protecting the nation's background check system, making sure that every gun is sold with the background check and closing the loophole, 97% of Americans support that proposition. With respect to banning of manufacture of new assault weapons, about 70% of Americans support that. and with respect to extreme risk laws, that has bipartisan support in most states. So these are not controversial measures. In fact, whether you're a gun owner or you're not a gun owner, most folks support these measures. The only industry standing in the way consistently of any of these measures is actually the NRA. And to be clear, they are not representing gun owners with respect to those positions. They're representing the gun industry.
The gun industry, which is also starting to make things like bulletproof windows and classrooms and vests and all of these other things that if there are more guns and the only way to be safe is to protect yourself with bulletproof stuff or more guns, they profit more.
If you want to see a version of a dystopic universe in which everyone has to carry a gun, just look at the monthly NRA newsletter. They're trying to create a perception of a society in America where the only refuge you have is to carry a gun with you. And that's why one of the key things that they were pushing in Congress before Parkland happened is something called concealed carry reciprocity.
This is the bill that they've been pushing until a new mass shooting happens.
Correct.
Prior to Vegas, they were pushing this. Vegas
That's
happened,
right.
They stopped. They're really the ones who kind of have to stop their political movements and conversations when these shootings happen.
They have to stop that, and then they have to resort to ad hominem attacks and conspiracy theories, like saying that the kids who are speaking up after the shooting who live in Parkland are somehow paid actors or reading from scripts. I've interacted with many of these kids, and they're not dissimilar to many other victim survivors that I interact with. They are speaking from a position of their truth, and what they're saying is, wait, I am a generation that has been schooled in lockdown drills. How has that protected me? In the end, if you're not stopping the bad guys actually from getting the guns, then you're doing me a big disservice. And I think I applaud them for lifting up their voices. I hope they continue to do so. I know that they have spurred youth across the country to become engaged and to really speak with authority from their own conviction that they have learned a lot about our government and our society, and they think one of the fundamental tenets, to Giselle's point, is that you should be able to live in a country where you live without the fear of being shot. That's kind of a fundamental right, too.
Now, those that are calling them crisis actors and putting forth these conspiracy theories are a sliver of a minority, you know, even amongst those that are NRA supporters or those that are gun owners. Yet those loud, crazy voices always get amplified because we can't get enough of crazy on TV and on Twitter. But why do you think the voices of these kids have been so loud? Why it feels like there is finally some change potentially happening?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is a lot of attention does go to mass shootings. Too often what we see, and we've noticed this in a trend over time because mass shootings have become very tragically more commonplace in this country, is all of the oxygen goes to the mass shooting, but we saw a trend over time. The energy and the commitment to do something about it would quickly expire, and sometimes in a matter of days. The kids who were able to speak out about this, the Emma Gonzalez's of the world, did so within 24 to 36 hours of the shooting, and that became the narrative. And no one could possibly watch what Emma Gonzalez had to say about this, reading from her notes of her AP government class about the Second Amendment and about her rights as an individual and not be moved by that. And I think it sparked a much larger conversation of many people just like her in schools throughout the country who said, yeah, wait a minute, I have also been subject to lockdown drills and I'm seeing all these school shootings. I could be next. I want to speak out about this issue. And we've seen when kids and indeed voters make this issue a top priority issue, things can change. In the gubernatorial election from my state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, actually, we had a pro-gun violence prevention candidate running for governor in 2017 against an A+ rated NRA candidate. It was supposed to be a close race. The pro-gun violence prevention candidate won by 10 points. People showed up in record number to the polls, and one of the top 2 issues in that race was the issue of guns.
We just saw in Wisconsin yesterday a state Supreme Court judge that won very, very much in support of gun control. I mean, it's weird to say a judge is left or right,
Right.
because they're supposed to be a judge. But one was backed by Scott Walker, who has
Yep.
an A+ NRA rating. And the people who turned out, it seems people are realizing that laws need to take effect. Something needs to happen here.
That's correct. And if you look at, just let's look for a second at the 2016 presidential race and the percentage of 18 to 25-year-olds who showed up to actually cast their votes in that race. It was around 18%. It's a very small number. If that changes dramatically going into 2020, the population percentage we're talking about there is about 17 million people who could cast their votes. Those could be deciding votes. And I think we're on a journey that if the youth continue to engage and influence their homes, their communities, and that's what we're seeing, this can be a decisive issue, and we can change this issue. All of the things that I've talked to you about that are policy priorities that we know can save lives tomorrow if enacted, those bills are pending in Congress. We have some good people trying to do the right things. Mitch McConnell is stopping any of them from getting voted on. So we need to change the demographic in Congress if we want to change this issue. That's clear.
Do you ever worry when you talk about stuff like the midterms and you talk about elections and changing things through elections that your message can get twisted by those that try to say, well, then you're just sort of doing this to elect Democrats? It has become so tribal in this country where if you are actually talking about issues, it becomes, no, you're just trying to make a power grab of some kind.
Well, I think it's harder for people to do that when I'm with the Brady Campaign, which was founded by a Republican who was shot in the line of duty, serving Ronald Reagan as his press secretary. The Brady law itself, that forms the bulwark of our nation's background check system, passed in 1994, was fully bipartisan. Until really a decade or so ago, almost every measure that was enacted was enacted with huge majorities of interest. So we are bipartisan. I wish that this issue had not become so polarized politically. What I'm seeing is many more Republicans who are moderates looking at this issue again with fresh eyes. And I will say, as the Brady Campaign, we're indiscriminate. We just support the candidate who's strongest on gun violence prevention. And I welcome all Republicans, all Democrats, and all independents to stand with us, because if they do, just look at the polling, you're standing with the majority of Americans.
Somehow they feel that their poisoned base is much more powerful, though. I'm not exactly sure why.
Yes, well, I think we're seeing with the groundswell of grassroots momentum, people taking notice that perhaps the gun violence prevention movement has many more people actively supporting them than they may have previously thought, and that's a good thing.
I'm curious if you know some of the hard numbers, because I can't remember it specifically, but I know that banning assault weapons alone on average would save like a certain number of lives a day, right? Or a year.
Yeah, well, the statistics that I have are really about what happened during the pendency of the assault weapons ban, which was in effect.
1994 to 2003, right? Or something?
Right. It was in effect for a decade, because when that law was put into effect, in order to get it through, Congress had to agree that it would sunset, basically, and then Congress failed to renew it. But during the pendency of that law being in effect, mass shootings with assault weapons went down tremendously. I mean, they were cut in half. After the ban was allowed to lapse, mass shootings with assault weapons rose by over 200%. So this
so
use of
obvious.
assault weapons, especially in mass shootings, again, it's a uniquely American problem. No other country in the world has these kinds of issues with mass shootings using assault weapons. And keep in mind that the AR-15, which has been the weapon of choice of many mass shooters, that was designed based on the frame of an M16. It's the same design, and it was designed to shoot a soldier in combat, the front through the skull and exiting the back of the helmet from about 50 yards away. That's what it was designed to do, and that's why we think it is inappropriate for civilian use. And so do most veterans that I talk to about the issue, who are very vocal about this.
I want to ask you to put sort of destroy a claim or an argument that many make in response to gun control, especially because Gisela's daughter's death happened in Connecticut. So often, those who don't support gun control say, "Well, Connecticut, Chicago, these states have, or these cities, these states have." The strictest gun laws. Yet sometimes they have, Sandy Hook happened there, or in Chicago you have the highest amount of gun violence almost in the country. Why is that? And how do gun control laws actually help these people if it doesn't seem like they are? You and I both know this is kind of
Right.
So I'm tossing it up for you.
There are a few different responses to that. The first is we obviously live in contiguous states. And so it is well worth an investment to improve the gun laws in your state. We have the research that shows these improvements to the background check system in states like California. In fact, the series of improvements that have made in California, which is one of the strongest states for gun laws in the entire country, have resulted in a dramatic decrease in gun deaths in California. Statistically significant decrease in homicides and crime and everything involving guns. So there's no question stronger gun laws work.
Same with New York.
Same with New York, exactly right. The issue that we have is that it's not any one legislative or policy fix. Let's look at the analogy again to cars. Just because you have a speed limit in a particular state that may not be the appropriate speed limit next door doesn't mean that you in your state should not try to protect the people in your state with appropriate rules. It also means if you have something that's a national problem, it really should also be solved with an appropriate federal baseline. And that is what we're looking for with Congress actually enacting measures that would apply to all states. So you don't have an issue with a weaker and a stronger state law. You have one law that says if you're a felon, if you're a domestic abuser, if you're in any of these prohibited categories, you can't buy a gun no matter what. And there's not this loophole where you can go on the internet and buy a gun from a private seller, and there is no federal prohibition to doing that. So it's pretty basic, easy fixes, and this is one that is crying for a federal solution.
And isn't it also the case sometimes when it comes to Chicago and Illinois being next door to states with very lax gun laws, that's kind of how they get over the border a lot of the time?
It is. I mean, I come from a state, or Commonwealth of Virginia, that actually has relatively weaker gun laws, as many states do in the South. We're trying to fix that in Virginia, but it will take some work. There have been many studies done about the iron pipeline in which states with weaker gun laws actually end up supplying guns up to the northern states, so-called iron pipeline states like New York. And actually, the New York government has been very active on that and trying to get cooperation from other states to prosecute it. It takes a lot of work. It's important work. One bigger fix is to make uniform all of these laws.
Absolutely. Let's get some questions from our audience right here.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. I grew up and still live very close to Sandy Hook, so I remember how my entire community went down into lockdown and the effect that it still has. And I also have a few friends who are victims of gun violence as well. And I'm curious, I have a lot of my peers have very similar experiences that I'd have, and yet they're still in denial about the problem that gun violence, the gun violence is. So how can I engage with those peers and say, hey, like, you know firsthand what this has done to our community, like, wake up. Like, how can I engage with them?
Did you want
to? Well, the first thing to do is to see if there are groups in the community. There are many chapters of people who support gun violence prevention, and that's how I got involved. I said, all right, let me see who is in my area that I can partner up with, and that would be the first thing. I know the Brady Campaign or Million Mom March is trying to form youth coalitions in different areas, and I think that would be a place to start.
Yeah, I think those are great ideas. I also think some of the some of the reluctance that people might have to actually become engaged in the issue are sometimes based on fallacies. Well, if I raise my voice, what will happen? Nothing will happen. Gun laws don't necessarily work, so maybe I shouldn't be working on this. Those are real fallacies. On the, if I lift my voice up, it won't count. I think all you have to do is point to the Parkland kids and what they were able to ignite across the country to realize actually every vote and every person does count here, and politicians are paying attention to the public outcry over this issue. I know, I work with a lot of them, I talk to them on the Hill. They are taking notice of the number of different people across all states that are now engaged in the issue. The other thing is, and I would welcome a conversation with you or go to the bradycampaign.org website, we have study after study that show that state laws and federal laws around gun violence prevention actually really do save lives. And I think if it boils down to, do these laws actually save one life or even hundreds of lives, that can cause people to become much more engaged. But they have to know the facts. So first they have to get informed, then they have to realize lifting up their voices counts, and I agree, doing it with a group of people makes it even more powerful. And the third thing is, understand what you need to be advocating for. What is it that you want to see happen, and set a goal for yourself? It could be registration, it could be tweeting out about the issue, it could be going to a town hall and asking a political candidate for the first time some tough questions. And believe me, that's fun. So engaging that way, I think, would help motivate them.
It's always fun to watch a person in power squirm, so go for it.
And I just wanted to add, denial is not going to solve this epidemic.
Absolutely. Are you seeing working in D.C. and around politicians that those that generally support or don't support these legislative moves are a little scared right now?
Yeah, I have some interesting proof points on this. And thinking about the question of the partisan nature of this, there's a Republican story and a Democrat story that comes to mind really quickly. We have a Republican congressman from New Jersey, his name is Leonard Lance, who our chapter advocates in New Jersey have long pushed and tried to persuade to co-sponsor background check legislation and to support positive gun violence prevention measures. He has been reluctant to do that. In the last year, he has moved toward co-sponsorship of most of the major proposals Brady is putting forward. Not all, but I think that he is looking at what's happening in the general public and the interest in this issue and the idea of being held accountable for it going into the election, and believe me, he will be, and trying to move closer to doing the right thing. Mark Warner, who's a senator from Virginia and has long been sort of more moderate on our issue, I would say, not really endorsing necessarily all of the things that we wanted him to, potentially co-sponsoring the concealed carry reciprocity bill, not supporting an assault weapons ban, in the last year has come out against concealed carry reciprocity, and over the weekend said that he's going to support the assault weapons ban. That's a fantastic, those are great proof points.
Yeah.
And that would not have happened without all of the roots momentum that's going on right now. It's happening because of these kids.
I think I have time for one more.
Hi, I'm also from Virginia, so it's nice to hear about someone else talking about Virginia. I feel like there are a lot of questions that I could ask that kind of fit within the realm of what we've been talking about. But I was thinking right now about Stephon Clark, who was shot 8 times by police, and he was only holding a cell phone. And I'm wondering, do you think that the conversation about preventing gun violence involves a conversation about police violence?
Yes, absolutely, I think it does. And I do think that, again, comparing the United States to other countries, that is, again, another uniquely American problem. We have far too many guns in this country. One of the issues that we have, obviously, we need to look at the racial issues related to this, and there's no question that we must. That has to be part of any kind of solution to this. Beyond that, we have a situation where many police officers that I talk to now assume that everyone has a gun. And that's a problem for all Americans. And many would admit that they are far too quick in making that assumption, with then immediately following gripping their own gun. And so that creates an issue that is layered and needs to be solved as part of this problem.
I want to thank the two of you for being here. How can people support the Brady Campaign to prevent gun violence?
In all kinds of ways. We always say it's time, talent, and treasure. So if you want to know how to become involved with Brady, how to get informed on the issues, any of the policy issues I've talked about, we have a lot of different materials on our website. Please visit us at thebradycampaign.org. You can find out about chapters in your area, different engagement tools that we are putting forward between now and November to really keep the momentum up on this issue.
Please take part. It's one of the most important issues going on right now. It's really the difference between life and death for not just so many, but for all of us. We don't want to get shot.
Exactly.
Kris, Gisela, thank you so much. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you.